In this video, you'll learn how to build a website featuring a lightning-fast chat with memory capabilities using Llama 3, Groq, and Streamlit. If you've seen the Jarvis video, you already know how incredibly fast Groq can process data. Let's do a quick recap. What is Groq? It's similar to GPT, but with an incredibly faster processing capability. Here in this example, you see Groq is done with a 500-word poem before GPT even starts. On the other hand, Streamlit is a Python library that lets you build applications in just a few lines of code with our magically simple API. Together, we will follow the Groq documentation to build a very basic chat completion. Then, we'll proceed step by step through the process of creating a Groq Llama 3 chatbot, allowing users to interact via a web page. Let's dive into the Groq Cloud documentation to see how we can get started. We follow the quick start tutorial. The first step is to set the Groq API key. Let's just copy the statement. But before, we first create a new file, app.py. Before we can set the API key, we need to create a new one. For this, we have to log into the Groq Cloud. The registration to Groq is free and done in seconds. Just go to API keys and create a new one. Just enter a name and simply copy the key. And paste it in the console. Once we have set this, we can continue. To keep things simple, we start with a minimalistic example and increase the complexity from there. Let's now copy the example code so we can try it out. The first thing we should do is install Groq with pip install. Then we can paste the example from the docs. What do we have here? At the beginning, Groq is imported. Then we create a new client using the API key that we just exported in the environment. Then we have a classic chat completion as we know from OpenAI. In this case with a Mixtrail 8x7b model. When we run it, we get a small essay about the importance of language models. And we see how fast that was. Totally impressive. Let's make it a bit simpler and say it should now tell a joke. Let's run it. Wow, our joke came super fast. But this video is not about Mixtrail. Let's change the model to Llama 3. We choose the 70B variant. Oops, Groq doesn't know this model. That means we need to check what the correct name is. For that, I go to models in the Groq documentation and see that it's not just 70B, but 8192 must also be added at the end. Let's try it out and see if it works with the correct name. And it looks good, we got our joke. Alright, we want to make it a bit more fancy and add a bit more functionality into it. Let's rename the file app.py to basic call so that you can access both files later in the GitHub repository. We take a look at what exciting examples there are in the documentation. I find the idea of the conversational chatbot quite interesting. So let's take a closer look at it. Well, we click on the link to the GitHub repository. Okay, we go there to the app.py. Well, that looks significantly more complicated at first glance, but we will try to build a simplified version of, and step by step, so we understand everything that is being done here. Well, obviously the chat was created with Streamlit. Streamlit is a wonderful library to create very simple web UIs, which can interact with Python code. But sometimes it feels a little bit like magic. I suggest that we first get familiar with Streamlit and get to know it, and for that, we first copy the two statements, the title, and a write statement. For this, I first create a chatbot.py file, copying content and importing Streamlit. We try to run it and get an error message. Okay, and we see that the indentation is not correct. Line 4 must of course be moved further to the left. Well, we try it again. Okay, and it tells us that we should start the program with Streamlit run chatbot.py. And now our web application is actually running on port 8501 on localhost. We'll call it up now and we see we have a website with our chat. Perfect. Then let's continue. Well, the next step is apparently to give the chatbot memory. The example uses buffer memory, similar to a bucket that holds only a few messages before forgetting the latest. We keep it simple and will later set the number of messages to 10. That means we will set our memory variable to a fixed value. Let's paste the memory code. We also need the import statements. The buffer memory is provided by the LangChain library. Therefore, let's install it. Well, and we now set the conversion in memory length to just 10 messages so that it can remember the last 10 messages. Then we have the user question, and there we have a text input, similar to the Python input, where we can make entries and they are directly saved in a variable. It looks like this. We can now ask questions like, what is the meaning of life? But if we press enter, not much would happen because we don't have any further logic. So let's see how it goes from here. The next code checks if the chat history variable exists in the session state. If it doesn't, it initializes an empty list for storing chat history. If it does exist, it loops through each message in the history and saves the conversation. After that, we have the initialization of ChatGroq, which gets the API key and the model. In the GitHub example, it could be selected via the sidebar. We'll make it simple here again and just hard code it. The following code creates a conversation chain object using Groq and the session memory to manage and remember the context of interactions. All right, let's copy the complete block. We see that there are some missing dependencies. We need to import ChatGroq and conversation chain. Let's copy the import statements from the example. Let's install the last missing dependency, LangChain Groq. And the indentation is off. Let's move everything to the left. Very good. Now we see that it doesn't know the variables Groq, API, key, and model yet. Let's simply take the code snippet from our base example so that it gets the key from the environment. Okay, but for this we need the OS library. We import OS briefly. We get the model name again from our base example. That looks good. And last but not least, we start processing our request. And here we have the condition: if a user question is there, then we actually start the conversation. This code processes a user's question through the conversation object, stores both the user's question and the AI's response in chat history, and then displays the AI's response on the screen. Let's move the user question of the input field down so that it's clear. All right, time to try it out. Oh, we get an error message that it doesn't know LangChain Groq. Well, here we have the problem now that we didn't set up a virtual environment from the beginning so that the dependencies are clearly separated from each other. We'll do that now so that we can install the libraries very cleanly within this project. We have to install all libraries again, but this time in our new virtual environment and not in the global one. I'm lucky to still have the commands in the history. And we start it again. And that looks good. We can ask again, what is the meaning of life? And we get a wonderful answer. Okay, now I also want to check if the memory is working well. And for that, I write once, hello, I am Sebastian, and that he should please use my name in every answer. And he confirms that and is pleased to meet. And next, I ask him whether he thinks it makes sense for developers to develop courses over AI. And perfect, the answer already states it directly. And he addresses me by my first name. That means he hasn't forgotten who I am. And that's great. Now we actually already have a kind of ChatGPT, which we completely control and which is much faster. Pretty cool.